Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of March 25th, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, and this podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada and sponsored by Stream Commerce, North America's fastest-growing Shopify Plus agency. Learn more at streamcommerce.com. In this episode, an exclusive interview with Andy Palalas, Chief Revenue Officer of High Tide, talking about their family of retail stores and particularly their CannaCabana retail cannabis stores. It grows in Alberta and on the eve of expansion to an open Ontario market. Next, part one of a two-part interview with Laur Friedman, president of the e-tailing group. Laur literally wrote the book on e-commerce merchandising 2 decades ago with our landmark book, It's Just Shopping. We chat about the current state of e-commerce merchandising and customer expectations and about the insights Wiseplum gathered in the Understanding the Canadian Consumer Study. Then, of course, I'll cover off the top retail news of the week, including the Sobey family donation to retail education, the landmark $100 million gift to the University of Toronto from George Schwartz and Indigo CEO Heather Reisman, Ontario Cannabis Store opening update, Holt's beautiful new expansions, and another one bites the dust with Steve Dennis. But first, let's listen now to my interview with Andy from High Tide. All right, Andy, welcome to the Voice of Retail. Thanks so much for making time to join us today. How's your day going so far?
Oh, it's going just fine, Mike. I just got back from Las Vegas and I'm sitting here with a head cold, but very excited to be on the podcast.
Travel is fun. Let's repeat that to ourselves.
Yes, indeed. Keep saying it until the tears go away.
Exactly. Well, even more than thanks so much for taking time to chat. I wanted to start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, but more how you came to work for High Tide, and then a little bit about what you do, and then we'll talk about the organization and some other stuff after.
Sure. Okay. Sure. Lots to say there. So I'm with the High Tide Group of companies. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, and I've actually been with the High Tide Group for about 3.5 years now. And being in anything in cannabis for 3.5 years kind of makes you a dinosaur at this point. So it's been a fun vantage point over the last 3 years. You know, when I first told my family that I got into cannabis, they thought perhaps that I was sitting at home all day smoking weed. But you know, of course, we do run a pretty significant business. We've got 5 business units that operate across retail to manufacturing. And you know, my background specifically is in retail marketing and e-commerce. And I actually got involved with the High Tide Group of companies by helping to start Famous Brands about 3.5 years ago. And so now I oversee the revenue portfolio of our 5 operating businesses. High Tide itself has been in the cannabis space for about a decade. We started as a retailer, first and foremost, as a smoke shop in downtown Calgary about 10 years ago. And here we are now in brick and mortar retail, both in the smoke shop world and in the cannabis retail world newly, as well as e-commerce and then distribution and manufacture of accessories.
Now, you started off, you mentioned Famous Brands. So that is the, looks like the branded version of your accessories, the name brand. So tell us a little bit more about how that got started. And is that right? So I see RGR, Famous Brands, Smoker's Corner. Tell us about those. Have I got that about right?
Sure. Well, maybe I can give you an idea of kind of those different businesses. So, you know, Famous Brands, where I got involved, came into the industry at a time where smoking accessories really was beginning to move from being a cottage industry. And I want to stress, you know, smoking accessories and distributors and manufacturers and glass blowers in the space have been around, you know, doing this kind of work for 30 years plus, right? There are a lot of folks who are in this industry today that have been around since this was very much not a cool industry to be in, right?
Yeah. Right on.
And so, you know, Famous Brands was kind of at that point of time where things were turning over into more of a mainstream, you know, rumblings about legalization here in Canada. And so we decided to leverage, you know, that time, I guess, 7 years of manufacturing smoking accessories and begin working with celebrity brands, working with movie studios. And so we actually got started with Paramount Pictures. And that was a big win for us because working with a major movie studio like Paramount Pictures at a time when smoking accessories and, you know, cannabis wasn't legal, et cetera, was a big deal for us. So, you know, Cheech and Chong Up in Smoke was our first license, quickly moved on to the Trailer Park Boys, Jay and Silent Bob, Snoop Dogg. You know, we do all of his smoking accessories. We've recently signed agreements with Lionsgate. We'll be doing their Hellboy movie and all the smoking accessories for that. That's coming out here this April. We're doing the Beach Bum movie with Matthew McConaughey and Snoop. We just signed on with Guns N' Roses. So we'll be producing their products for this coming summer and Sublime as well. So yeah, we've got a lot of celebrity horsepower in that group of products, right. And that just supplements
A great licensing strategy. I mean, the names that you've got associated with those products are fantastic. Particularly, some of those surprised me that they would be so engaged in such a wide variety of categories and licensing their products. It's an interesting perspective that they would, particularly early on, but now more common, I guess, right?
Well, I know that licensing and cannabis accessories and in the U.S., CBD and other ancillary products is becoming certainly more of a thing. I know that at the licensing show this year, which is a major show in Vegas, there's a section specifically dedicated to cannabis. And I know just being there last year with our contacts there that the appetite for cannabis businesses was very real. But I have to stress, licensing it's not a golden bullet. You still need I don't think a golden bullet's a thing. Maybe it's a silver bullet. It's not a silver bullet.
Not a golden ticket, but it's a silver bullet.
Sure. Whichever it is, Famous Brand supplements a much larger catalog of products that we produce as RGR. So, our full ecosystem of products is really what's made us who we are today. And, that's our distribution company where we service many cannabis retailers and smoke shops and ancillary companies here in Canada. And, we also recently acquired Grass City. It's the world's largest 23-year-old e-commerce platform for smoking accessories and water pipes. So that was a really great fit. Just slid right into our ecosystem and immediately began creating value for us. And then in retail, we've Smoker's Corner is our smoke shop. We've got 12 locations now. We've converted a couple of them into cannabis retail stores as CannaCabana. And then CannaCabana, of course, is our cannabis retail store that we're putting a ton of energy behind right now. We have 10 operating locations at the moment in Alberta, 4 of which have cannabis. The other 6 are awaiting the freeze to be lifted in Alberta. We have another 23 under build in Alberta at the moment. And then, we're hopeful that the 3 locations in Toronto that we've engaged with lottery winners about, will be open and ready to go in April.
Yeah, I was looking at this press release that came out this week, right? That you had partnered with the 3rd winner in Ontario. That's exciting news for you guys.
Oh, it really is. I'm really humbled that we have this opportunity to work with another lottery winner. I'm a proud Torontonian. I love Toronto, and I really have been excited since legalization was a whisper to see this come to pass in Toronto and to be part of the retail landscape here. And now that we have this opportunity, it really does feel like a big time for us. Ontario is the frontier that we're extremely excited about. And I don't think that there's any, there was ever going to be a perfect rollout across any province or the country in general. But
yes.
Within the confines of what we're dealing with in Ontario, I feel very positive about it.
Let's talk about stores. Let's talk about your concept. Tell us about how you approach the customer experience. Is it a technical sell? Is it, you've already discussed your thoughts around different concepts that you've seen both here and in the US. How do you guys approach the cannabis retail experience?
Well, I think that we had a bit of an advantage coming into cannabis retail in that we've been serving cannabis consumers in Canada for over 10 years. Right. So, we made a call really early on that the people that we wanted to prioritize initially, in service in our cannabis retail stores were the same people that were shopping at Smoker's Corner. And I think a lot of the industry went the opposite direction with it. I think that a lot of the industry was really excited about capturing the new cannabis consumer. And we are too, of course. That's a really, Canada is the first G8 country to be legalized, and we're proud of that. And we want to make sure that anybody who, is coming into cannabis and curious about it has an opportunity to do so in a space they feel excited to be in and feel is geared for them as well. But I think that there's maybe a group of people who form up a large percentage of the Canadians today that are buying cannabis, at least in Alberta, that perhaps felt a little bit left out in the conversation and in the retail concepts that they were being offered, right? And so, we wanted to create an environment that was playful, that was approachable, that was sophisticated, a little bit more sophisticated, for example, than our Smoker's Corner shops, but still had that vibe acceptance and of community around cannabis. And so, CannaCabana is a playful concept. You walk in and when you approach one of our stores, you'll see our palm leaf, palm tree wrap on the windows. In Alberta, you have to ensure that nobody can see into the store from the outside. And we've taken the opportunity to create a really playful, fun, colorful wrap on the exterior. We've always said that we wanted CannaCabana to feel like the sound of cracking a beer at 5 p.m., walking. We wanted it to feel like that, walking in, warm lighting, welcoming, a place where you can let out a deep sigh and browse around, not feel rushed, look at the products, have someone who can be on the floor, taking you through as quickly or as slowly as you'd like. And then, a seamless checkout process where you can ensure that, you've received all the information you need to make a good purchase. We're really committed right now to nailing the fundamentals. We know right now, even after 10 years of experience in retail, cannabis retail is brand new, Michael. How the customer wants to interact with the product. If anyone's telling you they know, they're wrong, or at least they're ahead of themselves, because we're still all learning, right? Our merchandising strategy is likely going to change. We get new learnings every day. Every time we open a new store, we do better at that experience. And things as simple as, does a customer want to be talked through the product assortment on the floor with an associate and be walked around, or do they want to come up and order off a menu board, or is it a hybrid of the two, or is one for the regulars and one for the new users? Or all of these questions are things that we're answering today and that we're watching and monitoring and getting feedback on. So I think nailing the fundamentals is probably the soundbite that I would attribute to our current thought process at Canna.
It's a very savvy approach, and it's going to 2 years from today, we're probably going to have a different conversation about how you would approach different segments, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go back to that early bet, which is that we wanted to just make, we've got a lot of love for our customers because they made us at Smoker's Corner, right? We've got no illusions to the contrary, right? Smoker's Corner is a customer-centric business. And when we came in with CannaCabana, there was a lot of directions we could have gone. We could have gone high-end. We could have done a lot of things, right? But what we wanted to make sure was that first and foremost, the customer that we had dealt with for the past 10 years was being honored and serviced. And then finding a way to make it accessible to the folks who, were new to cannabis or were coming in from a different segment, and so that they could feel comfortable too. And creating that element of inclusion is really important to us. And, I think that just talking about segments, right? I think that, there's a lot of conversation that's going on right now about, well, how do we get people to accept cannabis? How do we smash the stigma? How do we destigmatize cannabis? And I'll concede that exists, right? Of course, there's people out there who are still not on board with cannabis. Of course that exists, but let's be real. That's not our target market. We don't need to worry about educating those people because that's a real quick way to go broke. I think that from the perspective of destigmatizing cannabis, or let's say energizing people who aren't buying cannabis today, it's probably a little bit more about just creating some lifestyle around cannabis, making it, okay, well, legalization has come and gone. And maybe if I'm a person who's, a working professional and I've seen it happen, and some of my friends have engaged in cannabis and I haven't really pulled the trigger on it yet, or I haven't consumed cannabis in 15 years and I'm just not hurried about it.
Yeah.
It's going to be up to the retailer in this situation, in this scenario, to help create a lifestyle that person feels they can fit themselves into. Because Lord knows marketing and the way that it's being regulated today is not going to allow licensed producers to do that. Right.
That's right.
So it's genuinely up to the retailer to create a place in a community where people can come and feel excited about cannabis, because they're not going to come if they already feel a stigma.
I'm intrigued by the notion that you wanted to honor your Smoker's Corner customers first and foremost, make sure that they feel comfortable. So not start from a new bright shiny object set of customers. It's really clever from that perspective. Have they reacted well to it from your experience? Like, what's been the reaction of them walking through the door? They feel that vibe that you're setting up?
Absolutely. And, I feel very confident in the strategy that we've rolled out because frankly, and listen, we're great friends with many of the retailers in this province. I believe first and foremost that it's our responsibility as retailers to make retail great for cannabis. It's our responsibility to make sure that legalization is a roaring success and set an example for other countries that are considering doing the same thing. And so, we want to work as closely as possible with any other retailers in the landscape. And, I think that the bet that we took, which is ensuring that our current customers felt comfortable coming to CannaCabana, is maybe even one that some of our retail friends or our retail the other folks in the community are noticing, is that the people who are coming in to buy cannabis right now very much are not the new consumer yet. It's a much smaller percentage of people that are walking through the door that are brand new to cannabis than we even expected, right? And that's going to change. There's no question. But again, it's about creating a lifestyle that those people feel comfortable buying into, and that's got to start with a base of customers that you can, that you can serve and do a great job of, so that word of mouth can happen and all the other great things that create a good retail community can happen, right?
What's next for CannaCabana? What do you think about? I guess next is now, but first of all, you expand, take the concept and articulate it from coast to coast. You're going to be operating in places where they don't have that same kind of smokers corner experience. But is the big role for your licensed brands and or your licensed accessories? So how do you merchandise that store today and in the future?
Right. Well, it's a really good question. I don't think that so when I say our Smokers Corner demographic, yes, of course, in Alberta, I mean the folks who bought from us at Smokers Corner and who do continue to. But, in Ontario or wherever else, it's really just it's a group of people. It's the cannabis enthusiasts and people who are, occasional or passionate or what have you, users who are already in that community. And that's the group of people that I'm really speaking to, and so yeah, we scale up and we roll out more locations, and I guess I just have to bring it back to nailing the fundamentals. I don't think that we're going to be out of nailing the fundamentals for the next 3 to 5 years. I think there's going to be new learnings as new people that we were discussing, come to adopt the cannabis lifestyle and start doing business with us. I think as more and more people become regulars of our stores, we're going to have some great learnings around how we can better serve them. I think we're going to start to learn how to tell a better story about cannabis, because today we have very little, all of the retailers have very little differentiation in the product that we can carry,
right?
Because there's a supply shortage. But at some point we need to start curating the strains that we carry and curating the experience we want to give to our customers, and we are the point of brand for those products, right? There's nowhere else that they can really get informed about that. And so how do we tell better stories in our stores? How do we, you mentioned it can't just be transactional. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But education is not just telling someone how cannabis is going to react with their body and recommending something, that's going to be appropriate for their use. It's about, informing them on the lifestyle choice they're making when they take, when they purchase MK Ultra from Aurora, or when they purchase, a pre-roll versus, rolling their own, or, there's so many points of differentiation that we can begin to create story around, that I don't think it's going to happen in the next year. I think it's going to take some time for us to really make sure that those stories are being told in the best way possible.
Well, and of course, once edibles comes to fruition, hopefully this year, you'll see and get a sense of a whole other range of product lines that you'll integrate into your merchandising set. So it would be very dynamic for sure. I'm curious, I can ask you a product question. I see, based on the customer and your approach, I would think that things like pre-rolls are not the best or top seller that other products are. Is that the case that you find, or do you find any patterns in the products that you sell today?
That's a tough thing for me to tell you, Mike, because we sell out of everything almost every week. So it's a hard thing for me to.
We sell what we got. Yeah,
we kind of sell whatever we got. But I should say pre-rolls, and just as a consumer myself, I could say that pre-rolls I think are always going to be a hot seller. It's nice to be able to walk in somewhere and grab a pack of 5 pre-roll. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a convenience product, and there's a lot of reasons why they make sense. Right. And then, there's 1,001 ways to consume cannabis, water pipes and hand pipes and vaporizers. All of these provide different experiences, which is why cannabis retail to me is so exciting, because, the retail experience today in the world of omnichannel, as you said, needs to be experiential. And there are ways to do that in clothing and in jewelry and in whatever. However, in cannabis, we have so many opportunities to introduce customers to new ways to enjoy the products that they're seeing in our stores. And that's why I say I think that that's what we're going to be working on for the foreseeable future. And from the perspective of, are people going to be into pre-rolls versus, dried herb that they can consume in a water pipe or in a vaporizer? I think that the answer will likely end up being both. And it's an occasional both, question. Right? Yeah, it's about the occasion.
Well, Andy, you're a great ambassador and advocate, I think, for this category, for retail cannabis in general, and I wish you all the best. I think the caliber of your approach and the caliber of how you, as an organization yourself, are looking at this category will do it well for literally for generations to come. Because setting such a change and setting it out right, I think the tale will be told in several years. So, listen, thanks so much for joining me, Michael. On the Voice of Retail. It's been a great conversation, and I look forward to checking with you later in the year and see how things are progressing and keeping in touch.
Sure, would love to join you anytime, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Miller, brand strategist and author of Sticky Branding. Join me on April 18th at the Retail Marketing Conference. I'm going to be talking about how do you grow your brand from the inside out. I fundamentally believe everyone is creative, and inside every organization is immense creative horsepower. But too often we spend all our time looking outside for ideas. In my session, I'm going to show you how to unlock the creative genius of your team so that you can grow your brand from the inside out. Go visit rccretailmarketing.ca for tickets, and I can't wait to see you on the 18th.
Lauren, welcome to the Voice of Retail. So thrilled to have you on and reconnect. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in Chicago, and we're ready for it.
Start us off by introducing yourself, who you are, what you do, what your expertise is to our listeners.
Well, basically, I'm president. I founded the e-tailing group. I've been involved in e-commerce probably as long as you. So we like to think we're pioneers in the space. I've got over 25 years of consulting experience, and my passion's always been on the merchandising side and really working with the retailers to sell more product, to optimize conversion, that type of thing, grow the KPIs at the end of the day. And on the other hand, I've also done a lot of work and really enjoyed doing thought leadership for a lot of the top technology companies and, from a platform perspective as well as point solutions. And then I think we were always sort of known for our mystery shopping. We did over 20 years of looking at retailers. And I find that even today, I still look at those numbers and I still look at that methodology and use it in many ways, different frameworks, but still approach it. And I would say lastly, I have a passion for the physical store, which is kind of ironic, having worked in the digital side. And kind of looking at how stores are trying to advance their agenda. And I would say, I'm working a bit with Internet Retailer now as sort of a senior consumer insights analyst to kind of understand what is the shopper behavior and some of the things that I know we're going to talk about today, and to share the results with their audience via reports and a column called The Shopper Speaks, because, at the end of the day, like I used to say, it's just shopping.
Well, it brings up a great point. And really, when you say it's ironic that you're doing work in bricks and mortar retail, in my sense, the book, I literally said to someone, you literally wrote the book on e-commerce merchandising back in 2002. All the same fundamentals applied in different ways. So you literally, you wrote the book, and I was actually flipping. I still have a copy. I still flip through it because it is, I think, is relevant today. Now, interestingly, let's talk about the state of modern e-commerce, and we'll focus on e-commerce. We'll talk about retail, but the state of modern e-commerce. Looking back to the late 1990s, early 2000s, assess, in your opinion, how have merchants done, and where are they winning, and where are they standing still in terms of online retail and e-commerce from your perspective?
Well, in terms of where the merchants are, I think they're pretty strong. I think back to the days when the shopping carts didn't work and there was very limited merchandising. And I thought maybe what I would do is highlight some of the research that we've done just to kind of make a few of those points. So we asked retailers, we asked consumers, how satisfied are you with your shopping experiences that you had over the past holiday season? And we found that shoppers gave web retailers an 8.46 on a 10-point scale, and nearly 6 out of 10 gave retailers a 9. So I think there's a sense of it works. They know how to use it. We also, if you think back to mobile, which initially when it launched, it was very clumsy, but we asked as part of a design report, how well is, how well are you finding shopping on a mobile device, say, versus shopping on a desktop? And of the 61% of the people who said they were using a mobile device for shopping, 52%, just over half, gave their experience a 10. So I think if you think how far along mobile has come over the years, if you think about I can remember those very first experiences, and you couldn't scroll, you couldn't do anything, you couldn't find the buy button. So I thought that was interesting to see.
You make a couple of really interesting points. First of all, the technology used to be an impediment, and it used to be everyone was kind of making it up in different ways as they went along. Now with, modern platforms like a Shopify Plus, for example, you really have eliminated a lot of the thinking about the process. And of course, it, by its very nature, just kind of translates into digital. So I guess from a merchant perspective, you have to think less about, I want to say design, but less about flow and more about the practical, what am I merchandising and how am I going to merchandise it in my site?
Yeah, I think that's true. And another thing that I kind of noted here is that in my mind, the standards are in place. And, I think people know that the technology is going to work. There was a time when we didn't know that. And I also think what's interesting is there's an expectation of what the shopping experience should be. So it has to be accessible. It has to be efficient. People aren't going to wait. They think when you hit the send button now, the delivery is almost at your door, but it has to be personalized. And the fundamentals are critical. And it's really got to start with relevant on-site search results. Like if you can't, it's a Google culture. So if you can't find what you need very quickly, then people just abandon and they just move on to the next thing. And I think, for better, for worse, Amazon sets the standard in many of these situations. I think additionally, imagery is very, very different. So it's really a differentiator for a lot of people, and particularly I think with the brands going direct to consumer, and also the top retailers, they're really investing in those views and the video and really captivating the customer. Maybe in the old days, we couldn't really have the large images because it would take too long to load. But
right.
The visuals, I think, are really, really critical.
It's interesting you bring it up. It's a nice segue into talking about, and what got me thinking about your book actually, and got me thinking about reconnecting over and above that we hadn't connected in a long time was, I was looking at this study that Wiseplum did in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada and Google, and I looked at some of it's a very big, vast study, but some of the things jumped out at me, and when they asked consumers, what exactly did they want from the experience? Some very familiar things came up. You talk about standards and expectations in a Google culture. They talked about, the online shopping, they didn't want a lot in as much as they wanted, I want better product details, or I want faster checkout, or I want better pictures, all the things you've highlighted. Do you think that's because the expectations are only going one way and that's up, or because merchants still are struggling with some of the basics? What's your perspective on that?
I think the expectations will always continue to go up. People are demanding, but I also think on the other hand, they kind of know what they want. But the other thing is, I wrote down here as a note of caution, shoppers want it all. And you have to remember, it's like asking if you want more money. They're always going to say yes. So it's like, and then I think really what it comes down to is the shoppers have to think about how much they want to invest. The retailers have to think about how much do they want to invest. There's always chances to do it better, and there can always be an issue. So when you say things like, 36% of online shoppers want greater product details, everyone, a third of the people, what I've kind of learned with research is that a third of the people say one thing, a third say another, and a third say the third thing. So. Right. And we did, I think, to kind of piggyback on some of the numbers that you found, I looked into some of the additional research that I had done on another study, and we asked kind of a reverse scenario, not what they want, but what did they find? And it's sort of like you can kind of see that it's the same answer, but in the flipped way. So it was easy to quickly find what I wanted, 80% of the people. Well, 80% of the people is pretty many. I had enough product information to make a confident purchase decision, 79%. The websites I shop were personalized based on products I have browsed or purchased, 64%. And then the last one was store-based retailers offered experiences that were consistent across shopping channels, 46%. So I think that was the only one that I really saw as problematic. So I feel like, to have numbers in the 20 or 30% range of people who say they have an issue with something, it's like, there's always somebody who's going to complain about something, but I don't think those numbers are very high. So to me, it didn't really seem that problematic.
All right, a couple of great back-to-back interviews, and look for the second part of my chat with Lauren Friedman next week. Just back to retail cannabis for a bit. It's a milestone couple of weeks in Canada. RCC had their first retail cannabis forum, and Ontario opens up bricks and mortar retail. The RCC Retail Cannabis Forum was a great morning, with starting off with Westleaf presenting their Prairie Records innovative cannabis store format. My panel covering in-store experience. Check out the special edition of the Voice of Retail podcast that I taped at the panel that is available. And hiring advice from at both the associate and executive level, and beating any stigma that might associate itself with the category in your neighborhood. Basically, be a great neighbor. Good advice pretty much anywhere, anytime. Now, as part of my ongoing coverage of the rollout of retail cannabis, and courtesy of my friends at Environics Analytics Cannabis Insight, powered by Vivid Data, I want to share some really interesting insights about the two markets in particular, Edmonton and St. John. So I'm looking at the research now and comparing these two markets. I picked them because, of course, there's a lot of, the two provinces, Alberta and Newfoundland, have the most retail cannabis stores. And it's just kind of interesting to compare. And it's fascinating data because it looks at it indexes certain elements. So, for example, I'm looking at research here from St. John's, Newfoundland, and when we look at method used, for example, and this can be just illustrative for retailers as they decide to, in their merchandising strategies and just some of their marketing strategies. We've talked about both with Andy and on the panel. I see method used is a pipe and or a bong in St. John's, Newfoundland. Much happier to use that product. They're 23% more likely to use a pipe or bong than the rest of the population. So this is an index with they have a 123 index, so 23% more likely. Medical purposes, more versus recreational, 32% more likely to be using for medical purposes. In terms of frequency, 21% more likely to be using more than once a week. Well, more likely to enjoy the product more than once a week. Other things, they look at the index a little higher online, 15% higher online. It's interesting as we hear about the availability online is really accentuated, I guess you could say, by having physical bricks and mortar stores. I think you're kind of seeing that come true. In answer to questions, I believe cannabis is socially acceptable. 12% higher agree. So anyway, these kind of scans, and I'm going to keep these handy for the next couple of weeks, and we're going to look at different things. Certainly, we're going to look at Ontario as it roll out. Here's another one. For example, cannabis marijuana retailers should be allowed to operate in any commercial area. The folks in St. John's, Newfoundland, 17% more likely to say that. Now let's take a look at similar, actually the same data, when you look at Edmonton, for example. And of course, Edmonton, Alberta, with about 75 stores. So lots more availability of bricks and mortar retail in Alberta. Let's see, actually vaping is more interesting, is more common in Edmonton, 20% more common. So that stands out. 16% more likely to be using for medical purposes. And in terms of using or enjoying more than once a week, 12% more likely. 14% more likely to be purchasing online. So that's interesting. That's pretty comparable with what we saw. Let's see. Cannabis is socially acceptable, 10% more likely. Not surprising there again. And what else we got? Price. Here's an interesting. Prices for cannabis will go up after legalization. Only 2% agree. They agree. So 2% more than the index. Kind of a realistic assessment of pricing and pricing strategies. Should cannabis retailers be allowed to operate in any commercial area? 15% more likely. So again, there's great data, and as I look through this, I'm going to kind of weave narratives. Again, it's an important couple of weeks, not only because of the bringing together the industry, but we'll be watching closely what happens in Ontario. Anybody's guess, there's some more educated guesses than others about how many stores are going to open April 1st. We know probably, I'm going to say, who knows? I'm going to say maybe more like 5. Let's see if we can hold how close I am to that number between having the store ready to open and also getting all the right licenses in place. So let's see what happens in next week. Actually, we'll talk about next week's edition. All right, let's jump in right now into the week in retail. Starting out with 2 great stories. 2 families that are giving back in a big way. Retail families giving back in a big way to Canada. David Sobey and grocery chain donate $18 million to St. Mary's University on the East Coast. 150 scholarships over the next 10 years designed for the best and brightest to go to St. Mary's, to the Sobey School, and attract them. Really fantastic investment or contribution. And from Gerald Schwartz and Heather Reisman, Heather being the CEO of great retailer Indigo, a $100 million gift to the University of Toronto, which I believe is their largest gift ever. And it will create a whole new enterprise that is based on building on AI, which is really a leading practice, but now will have a permanent home at University of Toronto. The new Schwartz-Reisman Innovation Centre will be turbocharge the next wave of Canadian innovation, advancing how AI, biomedicine, and other disruptive technologies can enrich lives. So two great philanthropists, David Sobey and Schwartz-Reisman, doing amazing work. So that was a great way to kick off what happened in retail. Speaking of the gift that keeps on giving, Minister Fedeli from Ontario promising beer will be a budget. The upcoming budget, which I think is April 11th, in Ontario, will include an expansion of beer and wine availability. It's only been maybe 24 months since it's been beer has been available outside of brewers' retail and into grocery stores. Now, there's a bit of a breakup fee, unfortunately, associated with that. So the key is going to be how that, this story is from the Toronto Star, how that is navigated, because it was a 10-year deal put in from the Wynne government with brewers' retail when it was first, when beer was first started to be sold in grocery stores. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Other issues from Canadian Grocer: out of stocks costing grocers $63 billion in sales. There's a retail firm that surveyed 1,700 Canadian shoppers about what they have and what they can't find, I guess, more interestingly. Major Canadian grocery retailers are now raising prices. So there's this from the Globe and Mail. All the retailers, grocery retailers, taking price increases from their vendors and now starting to pass those on after many years, basically, of trying to keep those prices down. Of course, the big constraint on that is the competitive set. So it's a very competitive market, super competitive in the grocery category. So we'll see how those prices start to creep up a little bit to accommodate for some pretty sharp increases in costs, both in Ontario, when you think of minimum wage a couple of years ago, and Alberta, certainly. Alberta, the highest minimum wage in the country at $15, and Ontario at $14. Speaking of Alberta, it's not part of the not part of this set, but I was thinking about there's an election fast approaching, so lots of change going to be happening in Alberta one way or the other. If you looked at the polls today, and we know we can't always trust the polls for what they say, but it looks like we'll have the UCP Kenney government in Alberta. But who knows? We'll be talking about that when and if, not if the election happens, but when the election happens. We'll kind of dive in and see how that goes. Moving on to international stories. Great story here. Article really from Steve Dennis, who, by the way, late-breaking flash news, will be speaking at Store 2019 here in Toronto. Look forward to having Steve come up north and join us and share his insights. In this article from Forbes, he's talking about Another store bites the dust. Why retailers like Shopko fail. I'm not actually that familiar with Shopko, but basically he says it's kind of a symptom. Well, it should be no surprise that a lot of these stores are struggling, and they're trimming their store fleet. That's not fixing anything. It's not making them a slightly better version of what they were. Does not make them dramatically more competitive, and I guess this Shopko proves that. So another great article from Steve Dennis, and again, you'll see him at store this year. Rent the Runway now gets into the $1 billion range, one of those unicorn range numbers. So it's a milestone for Rent the Runway, and think about, if you want to hear more about Rent the Runway and their model, the Canadian version of Rent the Runway, Rent, Frock, Repeat, is a great listen in my last episode with Christy Weaver. But anyway, this from New York Times, just talking about how this rental has turned into a subscription rental, so it doesn't jam up your closet. It's now worth $1 billion with a B dollars. So pretty interesting there. Speaking of billions, article here from Business Insider valuing the Kirkland brand, Costco's Kirkland private label, as much as $75 billion. Apparently their sales are $39 billion, up from $35 billion in 2017. That's 2018 numbers. 10% sales growth. So they're valuing in this article Costco's private label, Kirkland, as a $75 billion brand. Pretty amazing. And our Amazon article for the week, there is always one, that they now have 140 of their own brands, their Amazon brands, and they just launched a skincare line. Now, the Amazon says, and this is rightly so, it's good perspective, so listen, private labels only account for 1% of our total sales, and yeah, we can think that in context of retailers, for example, at grocery retailers, some of them have private labels that account for 25%. If you think, I don't know what the number is for Costco, I don't have the math in front of me, but it's not unusual for retailers to have private labels, but we keep an eye on Amazon and see what they do. I've got a couple of Amazon private label products myself. Cooked dinner in one of them actually tonight. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Independent retail, we've got a great article from Vancouver is Awesome about a store with 200 different kinds of hot sauce. Actually, I'm in Vancouver this coming weekend speaking at events. I'm going to stop by that store and check it out. Army and Navy store, again in Vancouver, celebrates a 100th anniversary. What a great milestone. So check that article out from the Vancouver Courier. Great article from Craig Patterson's Retail Insider on the whole Renfrew beauty floor as part of the Bloor Street flagship renovation. That's really one. I won't describe that one too much. Really got to be seen. At 12,000 square foot concourse level, $400 million part of a $400 million store national expansion and investment as Holtz keeps its pace and place as the luxury retailer in Canada versus some pretty stiff competition from Saks, Saks Fifth and Nordstrom as well. Different categories, but same approach in some ways. What else? And you've got a good article here on Andy expanding their brick and mortar presence with an immersive retail showroom. This from BetaKit, a showroom and for an e-commerce. So we've seen this. They're already in Urban Barn. Of course, they were purchased last year by Sleep Country. But it's interesting to see Andy opening up, like Casper, really taking the page from Casper and other things. Oops, dropped my pen. You're seeing them take a step from other retailers who are opening up bricks and mortar. We know that digital first retailers, for example, in the U.S., are about 800 stores, I would say. But over 70% of digital first e-com retailers have physical stores. So always, and we see it even, interesting, right? We see it even in the retail cannabis space where physical stores play a vital role for product experience, and it's not just about online. Well, all right. Well, that's a wrap for this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you'd like this podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc & Company, and you can learn more about me on meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Join me again next week for part 2 of my interview with Lauren Friedman and an exclusive interview with Frank Monteleone, Senior Vice President of HR for Rexall, as we discuss digital strategies for attracting talent. And then we'll also see how the Ontario Cannabis rollout went. And for those keeping track, I said 5 stores will be open on the day. Let's see how close to the pin I am on that. Anyway, until then, have a great week.